2,000 years ago, what did Jerusalem actually look like? Not the city we see today, but the real Jerusalem, the one in the time of Jesus.
2,000 years ago, what did Jerusalem actually look like? Not the city we see today, crowded with modern streets and stone buildings, but the real Jerusalem, the one that existed in the time of Jesus, a city of massive temple walls, Roman soldiers, narrow markets, and thousands of pilgrims walking dusty streets under the hot Middle Eastern sun. And here's the mystery. We know some of the most important events in human history happened here in the year 33 AD. But the physical city itself, the streets, the houses, the sounds, the smells have mostly vanished. So what did Jerusalem truly look like at the moment history changed forever? Using archaeology, historical texts, and modern AI reconstruction, we can now rebuild the lost city almost stone by stone. And the result might surprise you. Because Jerusalem in the first century was not just a religious center, it was one of the most politically
2,000 years ago, what did Jerusalem actually look like? Not the city we see today, but the real Jerusalem, the one in the time of Jesus.
Imagine approaching Jerusalem from the surrounding hills. The first thing you would see is the enormous Temple Mount rising above the city. The complex dominated the skyline, a gigantic platform of white limestone walls built by King Herod the Great. At its center stood the Second Temple, covered in bright white stone and gold decorations. Ancient historians wrote that it reflected sunlight so brightly it could be difficult to look at. For Jewish pilgrims traveling from across the Mediterranean world, this was the spiritual center of their universe. Every year during Passover, the city exploded with life. Jerusalem normally held around 50,000 people, but during major religious festivals, that number could surge to more than 200,000. Temporary tents filled the hills outside the city walls. Animals for sacrifice crowded the markets. Priests prepared rituals inside the temple courts, and merchants filled the narrow streets selling bread, olives, spices, and wine. But beneath this religious devotion, there was tension. Because Jerusalem was not an independent kingdom, it was under Roman rule. Roman governors controlled the region from nearby Caesarea, but during volatile festivals like Passover, Roman troops entered Jerusalem to keep order. Armed soldiers could be seen near the temple complex, watching, waiting. The Roman authorities feared rebellion, and they had reason to. Jewish resistance groups known as zealots were already active in the region.
2,000 years ago, what did Jerusalem actually look like? Not the city we see today, but the real Jerusalem, the one in the time of Jesus.
Step inside the city gates. Jerusalem in 33 AD was crowded, noisy, and alive. The streets were narrow stone corridors lined with multi-story houses. Balconies hung over alleyways. Clay oil lamps lit interiors at night. Donkeys carried goods through the marketplace. Vendors shouted to attract customers. Fresh bread baked in clay ovens. Fishermen sold catches brought from the Sea of Galilee. The smell of spices, animals, smoke, and cooking food filled the air. At the center of the city stood the temple complex, the beating heart of religious life. Massive staircases led worshippers into enormous courtyards surrounded by tall colonnades. Pilgrims brought animals for sacrifice. Money changers exchanged foreign coins into temple currency, and priests performed elaborate rituals that had been practiced for centuries. But not everyone in the city held the same beliefs. Jerusalem was a crossroads of cultures. Roman soldiers, Jewish priests, Greek merchants, travelers from Africa, Arabia, and Europe, all moving through the same streets. And in this crowded city, one man would soon draw enormous...
2,000 years ago, what did Jerusalem actually look like? Not the city we see today, but the real Jerusalem, the one in the time of Jesus.
As night fell over Jerusalem, the city changed. Torches lit the streets. Temple lamps glowed above the city skyline. Pilgrims gathered for meals celebrating Passover. But outside the city walls, in the Garden of Gethsemane, events were unfolding that would change history. Jesus was arrested. Roman soldiers and temple guards moved quietly through the darkness. Within hours, he would face interrogation by religious leaders, and soon